Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, and in this bulletin, we'll get you a roundup of stories developing all over the world. First up, the day's top headlines. The situation at the Belarusian border with Poland worsens as Polish forces fire tear gas at migrants, pelting them with stones. Russia admits to destroying a satellite during a missile test on Monday. The US calls it dangerous and reckless. Moscow dismisses Washington's claims that Russia is creating risks for the peaceful use of space. Following a nearly 4-hour meeting between President Xi and President Biden, China's foreign ministry says the full reunification of Taiwan is the shared aspiration of all Chinese people. It warns Taiwan independence forces will be met with decisive measures if they cross the red line. Germany's energy regulator temporarily halts the approval process for the controversial Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia, saying the operating company is not yet compliant with German law. Libya's electoral authority rejects the candidacy of the son of the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. 49-year-old Saif al-Islam is wanted by the International Court of Justice over charges of crimes against humanity. And twin explosions in the heart of Uganda's capital Kampala leave at least 3 people dead and over 30 injured. Security forces say the suicide attacks were carried out by a domestic terror group. In virtual talks that lasted nearly 4 hours, US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping sought a reset in ties between their two countries. Biden and Xi stressed the need for open communication and friendly competition. The virtual summit was aimed at relieving tensions between Beijing and Washington that have risen over several issues. On Taiwan, President Biden struck a balancing act. On the one hand, he said that the US maintains its long-standing policy of recognizing only one China, guided by the Taiwan Relations Act. On the other hand, he said that the US opposes unilateral efforts by China to change the status quo of Taiwan. Chinese state media, however, reported that President Xi warned the US against crossing the, quote, red line of Taiwan, which Beijing claims as its own. He's reported to have told President Biden that support for Taiwanese independence is like playing with fire. President Biden also brought up concerns over human rights violations by China in Xinjiang, Tibet and Hong Kong, and discussed the importance of a free and open Indo-Pacific region. President Biden also emphasized the need to protect American industries from China's unfair trade and economic practices. Climate change was also a key point of the discussion. At the beginning of the meeting, the only portion that was open to the press, President Biden said that the two countries need to establish arrangements designed to prevent conflict.
Good evening to everyone here in the United States and good morning. It seems to me we need to establish some common sense guardrails to be clear and honest where we disagree and work together where interests intersect, especially on vital global issues like climate change. None of this is a favor to either of our countries, what we do for one another, but it's just responsible world leadership, and you're a major world leader, and so is the United States. How our bilateral relationship evolves seems to me will have a profound impact not only on our countries, but quite frankly, the rest of the world. We have a responsibility to the world as well as to our people.
President Xi called for greater cooperation and communication between the two sides.
Right now, both China and the United States are at critical stages of development, and humanity lives in a global village, and we face multiple challenges together. As the world's two largest economies and the permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and the United States need to increase communication and cooperation. We should each run our domestic affairs well and, at the same time, shoulder our share of international responsibilities and work together to advance the noble cause of world peace and development. This is a shared desire of the people of our two countries and around the world, and the joint mission of Chinese and American leaders.
The two leaders have previously spoken twice since President Biden took office, but only on the phone. With President Xi refusing to travel abroad due to the ongoing pandemic, an online virtual meeting was the only substitute for an in-person summit.
President and your colleagues.
Earlier on Monday, President Biden, with a flourish, signed his $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill into law. It is the biggest single piece of legislation since President Eisenhower authorized the construction of America's interstate highways in the 1950s, the largest U.S. infrastructure revamp in more than half a century. The White House witnessed a rare bipartisan celebration for the signing. Most of the crowd were Democrats, but there were also a visible handful of Republicans, members of both parties celebrating the bipartisan achievement together. Notable among the Democrats were Senators Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, two moderates who have warred with more left-wing members of the party and even now are still slowing the passage of President Biden's agenda. In his speech, the president said the bill is proof that dueling politicians can come together to deliver results.
My fellow Americans today, I want you to know we hear you and we see you. The bill I'm about to sign along is proof that despite the cynics, Democrats and Republicans can come together and deliver results. We can do this. Because of this law, next year will be the first year in 20 years American infrastructure investment will grow faster than China's. We'll once again have the best roads, bridges, ports, and airports over the next decade. And we'll lead the world into the 21st century with modern cars and trucks and transit systems.
The $1.2 trillion package will fix bridges and roads in states across America. It will fund an electric vehicle charging network and expansion of affordable broadband internet. The measure is also expected to create jobs across the country by dispersing billions of dollars to state and local governments. President Biden hopes to use the law to restore his flagging popularity. The latest Washington Post-ABC News poll, published just this weekend, shows an approval rating of only 41%, a record low for the Biden presidency. Support for Biden has taken a hit amid rising inflation and the country's inability fully to shake off the health and economic risks associated with COVID-19. In order to achieve the deal on infrastructure, the president was forced to trim his sails. The original package was cut back by more than half in order to achieve legislative victory. Biden had to fight for months to get squabbling Democrats to back him. Republicans are almost certain to make gains in midterm congressional elections next November, but the White House hopes the bill signing will give the president some new momentum.
I want to thank him for investing in...
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Now, one issue that beleaguers President Biden, fears of economic uncertainty across America. In the United States, food stamps, a program known as SNAP, is a long-standing Department of Agriculture initiative aimed at ending hunger and moving Americans towards self-sufficiency, but with conditions applied. And over the years, long-term food insecurity here has extended into every aspect of American life, including the military. As many as 16,000 active-duty military members are currently having trouble feeding their families.
Higher costs, limited availability and supply chain shortages. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed a hidden crisis inside the United States military, which is also one of the most well-funded institutions in the world. The United States spends more on defense than the other 11 big spenders combined. In spite of the heavy spending, military service members are reeling under a crisis. 160,000 active service members face food insecurity as per a hunger relief organization estimate. 29% of troops in the enlisted ranks were famished last year at the height of the pandemic. The conditions are worse for junior rank officers.
It really depends on the time in service. Like, I've only been in for 5 years. So the longer you stay in, obviously, the more you get paid. So when you're just starting out, it's a lot tougher.
The SNAP rule counts housing allowance as income for nutrition assistance. This makes many military members ineligible for the food stamps, even if they are from low-income families. However, charity organizations are providing a much-needed relief. An infrastructure of food banks has been set up near the military bases.
Due to the military life and the unique attributes of it, unfortunately, they often find themselves for some period of time, either by choice or by circumstance, living off of a single income. And it's just very difficult to make that happen, especially in high cost of living locations like San Diego.
The unemployment rate of military spouses is expected to be as high as 35% this year. Despite the Biden administration's promises of employment opportunities for military families with the Joining Forces initiative, the US is nearly 4.2 million jobs short of the number it had before the pandemic. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
While thousands of people remain stranded in freezing temperatures at the Poland-Belarus border, world leaders are engaged in a political blame game over the issue. The crisis at the European Union's eastern border is only escalating. Clashes broke out in the eastern Belarusian village of Kuznitsa. Polish forces fired tear gas at migrants after they resorted to stone pelting. Polish forces say one officer was seriously injured with a likely skull fracture. Russia is calling the use of water cannon and tear gas by Polish forces absolutely unacceptable. Earlier, the Polish Defence Ministry released a video that purportedly shows Belarusian forces attempting to compromise the border fence. To block migrants, Poland says it will build a wall along its border with Belarus. Planned to stretch more than 100 miles, construction will begin next month. It will cost Poland an estimated $407 million. The Polish Parliament has already given the go-ahead for its design and construction.
What we've been witnessing recently, as you said, is very well orchestrated and prepared by the Belarusian regime operation where the people are instrumentalized. There is a phenomenon of weaponization of migration, but this is a very cynical game of Mr. Lukashenko. But he's also forcing us somehow to lift the sanctions adopted by the European Union. And for that, he's been using the migrants as pawns in this hybrid operation, which is being conducted also at the information level, through the communication channels. So it is a very cynical game where the people are, as I said, used as bullet in this game.
Migrants continue to mass at the Polish border, despite Minsk claiming that it's trying to repatriate them. The Belarusian forces channeled the crowd towards the last line of Polish razor wire, but they were brought up short by a police cordon before they could cross into the European Union. Migrants have been trying to cross from Belarus into the EU for months now. Tensions soared after coordinated efforts were turned back by Polish guards. Brussels is blaming the crisis on Lukashenko's regime. It's accused Minsk of sending migrants to the border as retribution for earlier EU sanctions. Meanwhile, the EU is pressing ahead with fresh sanctions against Lukashenko. EU foreign ministers agreed existing sanctions will be expanded to target individuals and companies found to have encouraged the border crossings. The new penalties are expected to target around 30 Belarusian officials, the country's state airline and its travel agencies. The United States also says that it is preparing new sanctions to hold the Lukashenko regime accountable for what it calls the inhumane facilitation of migrant flows.
We are deeply concerned by the Lukashenko regime's inhumane actions, and we strongly condemn their callous exploitation and coercion of vulnerable people and inhumane facilitation of irregular migration flows across its borders. I understand that the EU today announced a new sanctions authority that could apply to the situation in Belarus. We too are preparing follow-up sanctions in close coordination with the EU and other partners and allies that will continue to hold the Lukashenko regime accountable for its ongoing attacks on democracy, on human rights, on international norms.
In his first phone call with a Western leader in months, Lukashenko discussed the crisis with outgoing German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The two leaders discussed bringing humanitarian aid to the migrants. During a joint press briefing of leaders from Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, the Lithuanian president said that Brussels has no reason to believe the Lukashenko regime, which is currently testing the unity of the West amid the border crisis.
It is totally clear what Lukashenko regime and their allies are seeking: to test the unity of the West. Huge amount of video, photo and other evidence shows armed Lukashenko officers' involvement in coordinating streams of people who came to Belarus.
It's not refugee crisis like in 2015. It's a Belarus and Russia-made hybrid attack for EU.
Now, Monday's anti-satellite weapons test carried out by Russia has sparked a massive backlash. The US has branded it, quote, a reckless mission. So let's break it down for you. On November the 15th, Russia tested an anti-satellite missile that targeted one of its own satellites in space, a 1980s-era Soviet signals intelligence satellite that had not been operational for many years. The test led to a huge cloud of debris. Close to 1,500 pieces of waste are currently floating in space due to the strike. Washington and NASA are furious with Moscow over the test. They said the debris poses a direct risk to astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the International Space Station.
The test has so far generated over 1,500 pieces of trackable orbital debris and hundreds of thousands of pieces of smaller orbital debris that now threaten the interests of all nations. In addition, this test will significantly increase the risk to astronauts and cosmonauts on the International Space Station, as well as to other human spaceflight activities. Russia's dangerous and irresponsible behavior jeopardizes the long-term sustainability of outer space and clearly demonstrates that Russia's claims of opposing the weaponization of space are disingenuous and hypocritical. The United States will work with our allies and partners to respond to Russia's irresponsible act.
NASA's Administrator Bill Nelson says he is outraged by Russia's carelessness. In a statement, he said, "With its long and storied history in human spaceflight, it is unthinkable that Russia would endanger not only the American and international partner astronauts on the ISS, but also their own cosmonauts." Right after the test, the crew aboard the space station were awakened and asked to close its hatches. Currently, 4 Americans, a German and 2 Russians are part of the crew. They were asked to take shelter in their return ships, all part of the so-called safe haven alarm procedure. NASA says that the ISS continues to pass near or through the debris cloud every 90 minutes. Experts say it could take up to 10 years before the cloud clears completely. Though the Russian Defense Ministry admitted to destroying one of its satellites during the test, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov dismissed US accusations that Russia was creating risks for the peaceful use of space. Russia's space agency also said the main priority is the safety of all crew members in the International Space Station.
Заявлять, что Российская Федерация создает риски для деятельности по мирному использованию космического пространства, но это по меньшей мере лицемерие. Как вы правильно сказали, фактов никаких нет. Соединенные Штаты призывают, как они выражаются, разработать универсальные нормы для освоения космического пространства. Но почему-то при этом уже многие годы игнорируют инициативу России и Китая о подготовке договора о предотвращении гонки вооружений в космическом пространстве. Просто игнорируют, настаивая на разработке, как я сказал, каких-то правил универсальных норм поведения. Но при этом сами Соединенные Штаты эту гонку вооружений развивают самым активным образом.
Moscow's latest move reignites concerns about the growing space arms race. Anti-satellite weapons are high-tech missiles possessed by only a few nations. India carried out a similar operation in 2019. The United States shot down a satellite in 2008. And China also demonstrated a similar knockout 1 year earlier. An auction house in New York is hosting its annual Icons and Idols Rock and Roll auction, this time with 900 pieces from some of the world's biggest music stars, from Eric Clapton's 1970s guitar to dresses worn by Amy Winehouse. Take a look.
This bomber jacket is from World War II, one that was passed on to Michael Jackson, who then went on to wear it for a magazine shoot. An iconic piece now up for auction at the Julien's Auctions, annual Icons and Idols Rock and Roll auction. The auction has a stellar collection of 900 items associated to some of the world's biggest music stars on the block this year.
Over 900 lots in this auction, all of the greats represented. You have Madonna, a suit that she wore in Evita. She, of course, won a Golden Globe for that particular movie. Michael Jackson, a great jacket designed by Tompkins and Bush. He wore it in London at the Brit Awards, and he also wore it, They Don't Care About Us, Spike Lee's movie that they filmed down in Rio de Janeiro at the start, the opening scenes of that particular movie. So that's a great jacket as well. Guitars, stage played by Bono from U2 and Edge of U2, also great pieces. Elvis Presley's Martin guitar.
This guitar belonged to Eric Clapton in the 1970s and is considered to be the star of the lot, especially after a Kurt Cobain guitar sold for a whopping $6 million last year.
Yeah, this is a fantastic guitar played by Eric Clapton, of course, playing with Derek and the Dominoes back in London in June 1970 when the band premiered, and just great photographs of Clapton playing this guitar backstage, on stage, various events, private events. So really solid provenance, estimated 300 to 500,000, and we think that's a conservative estimate for this Martin guitar.
The collection includes various pieces of jewelry and clothing from some of the greats of rock and roll, such as this dress worn by Amy Winehouse and jewelry by Elvis Presley. This mental health mark worn on the cover of Quiet Riot 1983 album as well as the original artwork. There are rare pictures of young Kurt Cobain concert tickets, as any ephemera even remotely associated with Kurt Cobain is highly sought after. All of these pieces are up for grabs with collectors with a deep appreciation for music and art and deeper pockets. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And we are going to groove on out of here. That's today's WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks, back again at the same time tomorrow. For more global news and updates, stay with WION. World is One.
There are many other... additions, right? Arab?